Okay, everyone, let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into InDesign, especially for project one. I think a lot of what I'm going to show you is pretty important. InDesign is a very layered program. There's a lot that you can do, and the things that you can do are very detail specific. The interface may look a lot like Illustrator and Photoshop combined. And there's a lot that you can do in InDesign relative to what those two programs do, but you have to use the right tool for the right reasons or for the right challenges to ultimately provide the right solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and do another walkthrough of InDesign for you, specifically as it relates to the context of your first project. So a lot of you did the shapes exercise pretty well, and you got a sense of what it was like to create some shapes in InDesign and work the page a little bit, make some compositions. But this next project is going to be really important for a number of reasons. It's a great primer for InDesign, but also what you're creating has some direct benefit to your career. So I'm going to start a new document, just hit create new. And the new document box here may show you the unit size picas. As I've mentioned before, we're not using picas, so set that to inches. Project one is going to have two specific executions. Essentially, you're going to be submitting a PDF with 2 pages in it. So let's set that up accordingly. Well, most, if not all, resumes are in the standard format of 8.5 by 11. Vertical. We're going to set up 2 pages. We're not going to set up facing pages yet. I'll show you what that is at a later time. And then we're going to maintain the columns at 1 and keep the gutter at 1.667. If you've been reading along in your text, you'll know what the gutter is, particularly in a double page spread. It's in the center. And occasionally the gutter is also referred to at the bottom. Generally, I refer to the top, bottom, left, and right open spaces as margins, all right, which coincidentally, we're going to talk about. These are different types of margins here. What this is essentially setting up is your safe area. So 0.5 inches in on the top, bottom, left, and right is going to be what is called the live area or safe area. The live or safe area is where you can put your design without any sort of fear of it being cut off at the printer. Most of what we're doing here is digital, so that is not a huge concern, but the margins as they're set here also act as a really strong visual indicator of where elements may lie in your page, and how to understand the relationships between all those elements. As you scroll down, you'll see your bleed lines. This is 0.125 inches. The bleed lines go beyond the safe area or the trim line. The trim line is the black frame in your artboard. So the safe area is on the inside, the trim area is literally where the paper is cut, and then the 0.125 beyond the trim line is your bleed line. The bleed line is important to set up just, again, to give yourself a sense of space and positioning. But if this were to be a printed document, essentially the printer is going to cut at the trim line where those crop lines are. And if you extend your shape beyond the trim line to that 0.125 bleed line, then that ensures that whatever color gets cut off is going to literally bleed off of the page. And then we're going to go ahead and just ignore the slug for now. Notice though that you can set up different custom files in print, web, or mobile. And these are all set up for the different screen sizes, and there are even some templates that are available. I would encourage you all to experiment with those and have some fun and see what it's like working with InDesign in the context of a different type of non-print solution. So I've got my document here. I'm ready to go. Let's hit create. And this black line here, that's the trim line. This purple line on the inside is your safe zone, your safe area. I always recommend that you have guides, your rulers on. So if your rulers are off, you can go to view and then rulers, okay? Depending on the version of the app that you're using, it may be in extras or guides. But I always recommend pulling out your bleed lines as well. And I'm just going to approximate this. Even though I may not be using bleed lines in this document, I still like having the sense of space. All right, let's close Slack here. It's probably one of you messaging me. All right, so we've got the guides set up. Make sure that you select all of your guides, the 2 verticals and the 2 horizontals, and go to the second page and then paste those in there, okay? That way your template is sort of set up. And then of course, save your file, all right? Always be saving, ABS, abs. Always be saving. Your thumb should be on control or command and your pointer finger should be on the S key. Every time you make a major change, save your files, okay? So I had you put the guides on both of the designs, both of the pages here, because sometimes they do not show up in the master, all right? So let's give that a shot. So I pasted the guides into the master and I'm just gonna delete them from my first page. And you'll see that there is an inconsistency. So when you place guides in your master, they may show up in your master template, but they will not show up on the page itself, even though the A master is applied to the page, okay? So what you're actually looking at up here is really what's called the master page. And the master pages, you can have as many as you want. The master pages are built to ease your production, to make it a bit more faster, a bit more efficient. But then it's also really to help prevent you from designing the same thing over and over and over again. So for example, both pages 1 and 2 have the master applied to them. And I'm just going to draw a shape here and give it a fill. And if you're looking at the screen, you should have noticed that pages 1 and pages 2 also have that shape. More to this point, I'm on page 1 and I can't move this shape around. I can't edit it, okay? So let's create another master. We'll call this B master, all right? And I am going to draw an ellipse and give that a fill as well. You'll notice that the ellipse is not visible on pages 1 or 2 because the B master is not applied to any of those pages. I'm actually going to choose page 2 and I'm going to apply the B master to page 2. And now you'll see the differences between the two, and I still cannot edit that master. So if you have a multi-page document, you really need to think about using master pages and assigning those masters to the pages in your document to ease your designs, okay? I'm actually going to delete these shapes from the A and the B master and sort of start fresh here. So I've got the 2 pages. Now, when you're doing project 1, I encourage you to have as many pages as you want to get you to the best solution possible. However long that takes, do your discovery work through InDesign, okay? So one thing that I could apply to the master, specifically to master A, and I apologize for clearing my throat, my allergies are killing me, would be my name, RJ Thompson, MFA. And I'm going to hit Control T, and that's going to bring up the character palette. And the character palette is where you control all of your fonts and all of that stuff. Okay, so this is the characters palette here where you're going to control all of your type. You've got your font family. Let's choose Open Sans, the style of that font. You can increase the point size by clicking the up and down arrows or literally typing it in. In previous versions, you were able to move the cursor to the left and the right, pardon me, to the left and the right to increase the font size. All right, so I'm going to keep that at 20. You can control your leading here. That's your line spacing. You control your tracking, kerning. Okay, so this is the space between letters here. You can adjust your vertical scale, your horizontal scale. Just to give you an example of that, it basically elongates the type along the vertical or horizontal axes. You've got your baseline shift here, and then you can do a skew or a false italic here. These are all really useful tools, and I find myself spending a lot of time with the top 4 specifically. Nevertheless, I've got some content here, and I'm going to condense this box. Like, don't feel like you have to go box crazy when creating layouts. Like, I should not see a layout that has all kinds of boxes in various sizes. You know, try to keep your files organized, your layouts organized, keep them smart. Okay. So I'm going to draw a rectangle here. We'll give that a fill. And there's essentially my masthead for my resume. Okay. So when I go to page 1, you will see that my masthead is there. If I go to page 2 that has the B master, it is not there. All right. So you've got all of your content here. Feels good, looks great, awesome. Now you can start to populate the rest of your resume. Okay. Of course, you'll want to include your contact information. Maybe let's get rid of that, and let's do a 2-column layout with this type here. So in one opportunity, you could probably do this and get away with it, okay? Or you could stretch that out, and you can split this into 2 columns. I'm actually going to look for my properties are here. Let's take a look around. Okay. It's changed so much. Hold on one second. I got to refresh my memory on something. And I refresh my memory. And again, they've changed the interface of the program from what I'm used to. And essentially what I was looking for was the properties palette right here directly in front of my face. So what I'm trying to do here is I can create one text box and then split that out into 2 columns. Okay. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay. So let's try this again. I extend that out. I've got the properties bar. Let's scroll down. And then you'll see text frame. I'm going to choose 2. And you'll see that that broke out into 2 columns within one particular box. So I'm going to do email, rjtpitt@gmail.com, and then phone, 412-779. Okay. Decrease the font size here. Now, I will say that if you're using 8-point font, it's way too small, too hard to read. 9-point, still hard to read, but it's getting better. You really want to find your balance between a 10-point and a 12-point for regular body copy. I think myself, regular body copy should be like 10.5 to 11 points, not a full 12. But it's up to you. Keep in mind that the larger your typography, the larger your type size, the less room you have to add content and really manipulate a layout. Okay, so I've got my 2-column layout here with my phone number and everything. That looks good. I'm just going to make these a little bit more precise. And by selecting both of these and then going to properties, you scroll all the way down, you're going to find one of your best friends, and that's going to be the align tool. And I'm going to align on the vertical center, like so. So now those feel really balanced, okay? If you turn off all of the guides and all of the extras, so like hide frame edges, for example, this is going to show you like very stark manner what exactly your page layout looks like. So if you're really looking at the spaces between the elements, you'll see that the space between the A and the E here, it feels comfortable, but the space between the M and the P feels a little bit wider. And then the space between the 5 and the trim line is much greater. So you have 3 different sizes, essentially invisible columns between these 3 elements that we need to tighten up a little bit. Okay. So when you pull in the this 2 column piece here, watch what happens. So you're eating into the first column. So you can control that manually like so, or you can adjust that over here, okay? Exactly where you set this up. So if this is the amount of columns in a particular element, this is the space between, all right? So that's 0.125, okay? If I move that over again, it's still gonna crunch. So 0.125 is sort of our threshold. So one thing that I like to do, and it might be a bit more manual, but I like to draw shapes. So I'm going to make this a 0.125 by 0.125 shape. And let's give that a fill. And here it is. So let's zoom in. And what I like about this is that it gives me a visual way to understand space between elements. So I'm going to move this right here. And you know, that feels okay. I can even move this over a little bit, like so. Okay. So I've got this this object here that roughly fills the space between the elements. I'm going to move this over to here and just kind of line those up. So now I know that these are roughly the same widths. Okay. Looks good, not bad. Feels a little cramped. Let's adjust that. There we go. Okay. So I can keep these as they are, or I can maybe center them. One thing I would recommend is actually keeping your name or your logo within the upper quadrant here, this upper quarter area, with respect to the rest of the layout. We actually, when you have a stack of papers, not that resumes are even reviewed as a stack of papers anymore. What an outdated concept, right? But nevertheless, we read from top to bottom, left to right. So if you've been following along in the book, we read according to an F pattern from left to right, down, left to right, or a Z pattern, which starts in the top, moves to the right, and then moves to the bottom, moves to the right. So F or Z pattern, either way, both patterns start here. Okay, so your logo does not necessarily need to hug this pink line, which is the safe area guideline, but it should be within this area. Okay, you have to apply proper spacing and breathing room to really make a difference there. Okay, so nevertheless, I'm just going to feel that out. That seems to work okay for me, and we're good. Okay, so there's my design there. If we look at the master, all of the design is going on the master first before it's going anywhere else. So really try to get your master document in the best kind of shape possible, and then you'll be able to design the rest of your file. Okay, so let's talk about the content of your resume. All right, so you've got all of this space, and you can easily put in placeholder text. Okay, so let's do fill with placeholder text. You can put in all the spaceholder text that you want, and that's all well and good. But ultimately, you have to give that some formatting. Okay, and I want to talk about columns first. So we're going to use this this as an example. All right, so what you're looking at here is a column that is essentially 100%. So this takes up the entire horizontal space. If you break this down like so, and I'm just going to spitball this, you could say that this column breakdown is an 80-20, 80% on the left, 20% on the right. Break this down even further. Now you've got 70-30, okay? 60-40, 50-50, okay? So you can keep going down. Now that's just, those are just two column splits, all right? Generally, I recommend if you're going to have a resume that has more than one column, try to keep it at an 80-20. So that way your content here will be well served in both columns. So what you're looking at here is a little bit busy, but what I really want you to focus on is not so much that lorem ipsum, but this, line lengths. Think about the books that you read. Think about like some of the novels that you read. Some books are easier to read because they have shorter line lengths. Some are more difficult to read because they have longer line lengths. The longer your line lengths, the more you risk in clarity and concision. You need to be very concise with your resume and very on point and specific, all right? The operative phrase with a resume is less is more, okay? So always be pursuing it in that regard. So I generally recommend, like a 70-30 split. That works pretty well, but don't feel like you only have to have two columns. I would definitely try to keep it to one or two columns, but look what happens when you introduce three. So where I was doing the 70-30 splits or the 80-20 splits before, you introduce more than three columns, and now you're going to be dealing with a lot of content. Okay. While this is nice and clean and it works, it's just not appropriate for a resume. This is a choice that's much better for page layout, magazines, posters, etc. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to pull this out to about, let's say, do a 70-30 roughly. Okay, and I'm actually going to delete all of this content. We'll delete it here as well. We'll keep the boxes there, right? So let's show the frame edges so I know that they're there. And that also gives you some context for the elements on the page. I'm going to put in heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6. Most page layouts have 6 different headings, okay? And generally they are all the same style, but the type size is a little bit different. So we're using Open Sans here. I will use Open Sans semi-bold. Okay, heading 1, let's set that at, I don't know, let's say 24. Heading 2, we'll set that at 18. Heading 3, 16. Heading 4, 14. Heading 5, we'll keep it 12. And then heading 6, we'll keep it 10. I just want you to be wary of how big you're making your fonts. 34 is gigantic on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Try to keep it under 24 point, but you'll notice across headings 1 through 6 that the only thing, it's in a descending order from top to bottom, and the only thing that I've really changed is the type size, okay? Now, heading 1 is going to be really good for like employment history or education. Heading 2 would be good to identify the companies that you work for. Heading 3 would be great for addressing skills. I'll give you an example of that. I am going to clone this and just move it over here a little bit so I have a frame of reference. Don't be afraid to clone your elements and push them off the artboard so you have them within your grasp. Literally, you can click and drag them over. Or you just have them as quick reference. So the next thing that I want to show you is very much in line with that templated process with the masters. The difference here is we're not going to create a master, but we're going to create what is called a character style. A character style is a designated set of styles that are pre-designed by you. And really, all you have to do is exactly what we've done here by creating all those different headings and then opening your character styles palette and then hitting the addition button. And it's going to be called character style 1. And you're going to want to name this heading 1. Okay, so let's go right down the list. The more of this process work you do up front, the more efficient and frankly fun the designing process will be, because you've eliminated all of the technical considerations from your process. So if you do this baseline work, you know, everything is set up properly, you'll have more fun just doing the design work. All right. So I'm going to type in experience. And as I said earlier, experience would probably be best set at heading 1. So I'm going to type that word in and choose the heading 1 character style. Boom. There we go. Now, one thing to consider here is that experience is actually larger than my name, and that's going to be really distracting. So maybe 24 points is not the best solution. So double click on your heading, and on the left-hand column, you'll have a number of different options for color, for underlining, open type, character color, anything. And I'm just going to decrease this to 20. And you'll notice that when I changed heading 1, it changed experience, it changed heading 1 over here, and it's still in the descending order, and that's great. So if I pop over to my master and find my name, I'm going to increase that just a little bit, because one of the things that you need to be considerate of is hierarchy, all right? Especially if you're using an F pattern for eye movement. The better your hierarchy, the easier it will be to read. So as you're looking at this, my name is the largest thing on the page, and then the second largest thing is experience. So you're actually conceptually tethering these two ideas together. Okay, so one thing that you may see a lot is, hey, I'm going to have multiple text boxes, and let's put in this copy and choose none. Well, I need some body copy, and we've kind of identified that 12-point open sans is pretty good. So let's add a new character style for that. We'll call this body copy. Drop back over to page 1, select the SFA, SDF, ASDF, etc. Apply my body copy, and now we're good to go there. Okay, so I've got my content, I've got the 2 boxes. You don't necessarily have to do this. Like, you could easily just drop down and put that text in and then apply the character style. And that way it eliminates all of the boxes in your design. It keeps things a little bit more clean. So I'm going to call this company 1. Now, again, this is just regular body copy, and I had suggested that heading 2 or 3 would be good for the name of the company. So let's choose heading 3, and you'll see that it follows that same descending order. But I want to get really specific here. So heading 3 is going to be company name. And I want to call more attention to it than just 16-point semi-bold. Okay, so I can add an underline. I can change the color. Most cases, all you have to do is underline it. I think that's appropriate. Oh, it's over here. Let's see here. Hide options, underline, Control-Shift-U. All right, so there's my underline. And I need to apply, so there's the company name. I could put a hyphen and then my job title, or I could lead with job title and then company name, which I think in most cases is a good choice, considering that I don't necessarily care who you work for. It's not the top of the mind. It's what you did for them. What was your job title? So I'm going to choose one more option here, and I'm actually going to take out company name and put in job title. And then I'm going to click and drag heading 3/job title down to the addition sign and make a copy. And we'll call this company name. And under the basic character formats, I'm going to choose semi-bold, italic. And now I've got that set up. So now I can follow this process out. Well, let's take it one step further. I need to add some, like a description. Let's pretend that this is the description. And of course, the type formatting that we've got here is not what's going to stay, but that's the description. So let's choose heading 4 for the description. And you'll notice that that underlining maintains, so Control-Shift-U to get rid of that. And yeah, it looks okay. I feel like heading 4 might be a bit too big. So let's do heading 5. Okay, yeah, this makes more sense. But it's still pretty tight. The space between job title and company name, and then lorem ipsum. Okay, so you can select that text, and then you can control your line spacing. But notice that I only want to affect the space between job title and lorem. I don't want to affect the space of lorem of these two lines. So I'm going to set that back to auto. And I'm just going to do a return. And this has no style applied to it now. So I can freely adjust the leading. There we are. Freely adjust the leading, tighten that gap, give it some space. Okay. So you may hear it in the industry, if in an internship or if you're doing print work, someone says it's 12 over 14:4. What they're really saying is it's 12-point font over 14.4 leading, or it's really, it's not so much font size, it's leading and kerning. So they may say, you know, 14.4 over 0. So 14.4 for the leading, and then 0 is the kerning. Okay. Just an interesting little tidbit there. You may not hear it much anymore. I think that was more of an old school phrase. Okay, so I need to add one more thing, and that may be just throwing in some little factoids about the position. Okay, so we need to find some bullet points. Okay, so in this properties bar, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see bullets and numbering. I'm gonna make sure I'm on its own row and then choose the bullet points, and then add your text, and then those will show up automatically. Okay, but again, we kind of have the same problem here with the line spacing. So I'm going to tighten that up a little bit. If I recall, this was set at 10. So 10 points for our leading is a very comfortable measure for space between bodies of text. All right. So there we go. That looks good. And then you can either choose to keep all of your content in one box. So you can essentially just rinse and repeat this content and then clean it up after the fact. Those bullet points leave a little something to be desired. So let's get rid of that. Fortunately, that's an easy fix. So you can drop everything in there like so. Or you can, go box crazy. But generally, I recommend keeping things within one particular text frame. Okay, so there's that. So what's going to go over here? Okay, where's your education going to go? So some things I recommend putting in here would be soft skills, and then you could use the bullets to introduce those. And generally, if you can keep this section a little bit smaller and a little less invasive, then people will still pay attention to it, but it won't feel like it's overcrowding the rest of your design. Okay, so let's do a hard return there, and then set this at 10 point. One of the things to note when doing this is that you are absolutely going to have to pay attention to the small details, especially if you're trying to fit as much into your resume as humanly possible. Okay. And in fact, you may not even, I think 3 facts is pretty good. Depending on what you did and how long you did it, you may want to add more facts. Just know that that is going to sacrifice your vertical space if you go longer. All right, if you add more details. So let's add a little bit of a breathing room here. I'm going to change this to education, and then you could list degree, and then college name. I don't think you necessarily need to offer any content, but you could put stuff like Dean's List, 3.0 GPA, student org leader, up to you. And this gap even, this is pretty tall. That's set at 24 point. Let's break that down a bit. I don't think you need to set it at 10, but I think 12 works pretty well there. It might be a little too tight for the experience area. Let's take a look. Oh, it's okay. Okay, cool. So you've got experience, education. You may notice this little green character that shows up when you're moving things around. That is the snap, and the snap is going to tell you basically the mathematical position for each of these boxes, and to make it, to use those specific measurements to make a more harmonious and consistent, mathematically consistent layout. So one thing to consider here is, if you look at the space between these 2 elements, is it equivalent to the space between this element and this one? And if it's not, should it be? So by using that snap, I can be a better judge of space. Okay, Control S to save. And now you've got the basic framework for your resume. Okay. Now, one thing I do recommend doing is going to pages and then duplicating this. It'll show up as page 3. And, don't be afraid to make a folder for your styles. So we'll call this master A. And these are all of the styles that will apply to that master A design. And then you can copy them. You can duplicate that style group and call this master B and duplicate it again. And you could do master C, which could be a variation on master A, or you could call it whatever you want. But now when you copy and paste those styles, and let's say, for example, I'm just going to change this to extra bold. Okay. I changed heading 1 in master C to extra bold. Notice that it did not change heading 1 in master A. So now you can manipulate all of these styles without fear of making a huge error. Okay. So let's apply master C heading 1, and there you go. Okay. Work smarter, not harder, people. This project should not take as long as you would think. If you learn the software, if you're doing the classroom and the book tutorials, you're learning about style sheets and paragraph styles and the masters, then this project could go pretty smoothly and quickly. All right, so now you can have a field day and design whatever resume your huge brain comes up with. Okay, sky's the limit, but I would generally recommend you stick very close to the specific guidelines of the project with respect to content requirements. And then also, one of the best ways to learn about good resume design is to just look at resumes. Do a Google search, find good resumes, find good good examples of resumes. Reach out to people that do resume work, particularly like CCAC's career management unit. I don't know those people personally, but you could contact them and say, hey, could you send me a few examples? They're probably going to send you Word documents or examples of resumes that are not designed. You are a designer. You need to design your resume, be it as a PDF or as a print piece. You need to design it. My resume, admittedly, full disclosure, has always been designed, but my academic CV got so overwhelming that I had to put it into Microsoft Word. The trick there is knowing how to manipulate Word to make it look like an InDesign design kind of document. And that's tricky because Word sucks and it's a pain in the ass, and Pages isn't any better, and Google Sheets is only marginally better, if not practically the same. So yeah, so keep those things in mind. Let's take a look at this design without the frame edges. And, it feels digestible. There's a lot going on, but it is a resume. There is going to be a lot of content. We can maybe select these 3 elements, move them down a little bit, give that some breathing room. Maybe I can duplicate these so it says soft skills, hard skills, maybe awards, or not awards, but maybe scholarships. Maybe it says technology skills. It's up to you. We will determine what is best through the discussion group critique, and then also in consultation with you and I. And then also at the end, when we send these to some career management folks, and they offer their insights. So have fun with this. Experiment with the program, experiment with the software, but please, for the love of God, work smarter, not harder. Use the character styles. Be smart about this. Use the paragraph styles. These are here for your benefit, and don't be afraid to experiment. I think that's really where I have to leave things. Research good resumes, use them as inspiration, try to rebuild them in InDesign, experiment from that. And then, ultimately you're going to come up with a nicely contained design that represents you, who you are, who you want to be, where you want your career to go, and more. So let me know what you think, and I'll look forward to seeing your projects.